Hello everyone! Before we dive into today's story, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this post a like if you find it helpful. Your support really means the world to me. Now, let me tell you about something that happened to me. Think about how you treat my brother. Those were her words. My name is David. I'm 38 years old and I work as a team leader at Morrison Tech in Columbus, Ohio. That evening, lying on my own sofa with my clothing thrown beside me like trash, I did exactly what my wife Sarah had demanded. I thought about how I treated Kevin. I thought about how I'd been covering his cell phone bill for 8 months. How I'd purchased groceries for him every week without receiving a single word of gratitude. How he abandoned dirty dishes in the sink for days expecting me to wash them. How he took my tools and never brought them back. How he used my car without permission, returning it with the fuel tank completely empty. Kevin had been staying with us for a year and 4 months, not visiting, but actually living here. My guest bedroom had transformed into his permanent space, complete with his gaming equipment, his clothing scattered everywhere, and his mentality that I somehow owed him everything. The discussion that resulted in me sleeping on the sofa had been straightforward enough. I'd sat down with Sarah and Kevin after our evening meal, brought out our monthly budget, and explained that finances were becoming strained. My employer had eliminated overtime hours, and Sarah's part-time position at the neighborhood clinic wasn't covering the additional costs Kevin brought with him. We need to work out a solution, I'd said, looking straight at Kevin. Either you begin contributing toward utilities and food, or we need to discuss alternative options. Kevin had actually laughed out loud. Alternative options? This is family, David. You don't ask family to pay. Sarah had immediately intervened. David, that's completely unreasonable. Kevin is experiencing a difficult period. The difficult period had stretched over a year. Kevin had supposedly been searching for employment since he moved in, but somehow never quite discovered anything that satisfied his requirements. Too early in the morning, too far away, insufficient pay, wrong kind of work. Always some excuse. I'd watched my savings account decrease month after month. Watched Sarah make justifications for behavior she'd never accept from anyone else. Watched my own house become a place where I felt like an unwanted visitor. That evening on the sofa, staring up at the ceiling, something changed inside me. It wasn't exactly anger, more like sudden understanding. I'd been so concentrated on maintaining harmony, on being the supportive husband, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to have my own limits respected. Sarah's words kept repeating in my head. Think about how you treat my brother. I had treated him like family. I'd provided him shelter, food, and patience he hadn't earned. And somehow that made me the bad guy in this situation. The house was silent except for the noise from Kevin's TV upstairs. My TV in my house paid for with my earnings. I shut my eyes and began formulating a plan. Sarah and I had been married for 6 years. We'd purchased this house together 4 years ago, a humble 3-bedroom place on the east side of Columbus. It wasn't luxurious, but it was ours, or at least it had been. Kevin appeared in January of the previous year. Sarah's younger brother, 30 years old and fresh from what she described as a terrible breakup. He'd been living with his girlfriend in Cleveland, but things went wrong and suddenly he needed somewhere to stay. Just for a couple of weeks, Sarah had promised, until he gets back on his feet. I'd agreed because that's what you do for family. You help when people are in need. My own brother had stayed at my place years earlier when his marriage collapsed. The difference was that Michael had found an apartment within 6 weeks and paid for food the entire time he was there. Kevin was different. He moved in like he'd been invited to a permanent holiday. The first month, I'd assumed he was still getting adjusted. By the 3rd month, I'd started dropping suggestions about job searching. By the 6th month, I'd begun having direct discussions about timelines. Sarah always had a ready excuse. The employment market was challenging. Kevin was dealing with depression. He'd just started applying for this really promising opportunity. He needed time to determine his next move. Meanwhile, my grocery expenses had doubled. Our utility costs skyrocketed from someone being home all day with the heating turned up and every electronic device running. My car developed mysterious new scratches and dents. Tools vanished from my garage. The breaking point discussions had begun 3 months ago. Small ones initially. Me mentioning to Sarah that perhaps Kevin could help with the electricity bill. Her explaining that he was family and I was being small-minded. Me suggesting he might contribute to household tasks. Her reminding me that he was going through a challenging time. Last month I'd tried a different strategy. I'd sat down with Kevin directly, man to man. Explained that I wasn't trying to evict him but we needed to establish some basic rules about costs and responsibilities. He'd nodded along, agreed completely, then changed absolutely nothing. 2 weeks ago, I discovered he'd been ordering delivery food on my credit card. When I confronted him, he'd claimed it was a misunderstanding. When I asked Sarah about it, she'd said I was overreacting to an honest error. That's when I'd started noticing other things. How Sarah's attitude changed whenever I mentioned Kevin. How she'd started treating my concerns like personality defects. How she'd begun making me feel guilty for wanting basic respect in my own home. The warning signs had been there for months. I'd just been too busy trying to be the good guy to see them clearly. The realization hit me around 3 a.m. lying on that sofa with a thin blanket and a throw pillow that smelled like Kevin's aftershave. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about chores or respect or even Kevin's freeloading. This was about the fact that my wife had chosen her brother over me, and I'd been too busy trying to fix things to see it. Sarah had thrown my clothes on the sofa like I was a stranger who'd overstayed his welcome in my own house because I'd asked her brother to contribute financially or make other living arrangements. I thought about the last year and 4 months. Really thought about it. Every conversation where Sarah had dismissed my concerns. Every time she'd made me feel selfish for wanting my own space back. Every instance where she'd treated Kevin's comfort as more important than our marriage. The pattern was obvious once I stopped making excuses for it. Sarah had made her choice long ago. She just never bothered to inform me. I sat up on the sofa and looked around the living room. My furniture, my television, my house. But somehow I was the one sleeping on the sofa because I'd suggested that a grown man should pay his own way. The anger came slowly, like a tide rolling in, not the explosive kind that makes you slam doors and shout. The quiet kind that burns steady and changes everything. I walked into the kitchen and made coffee at 3:30 a.m. Sat at the table where I tried to have that reasonable conversation about the budget just hours earlier. The table where Kevin had laughed at the idea of contributing to his own living expenses. That's when I understood what needed to happen. I wasn't going to argue about this anymore. I wasn't going to have another conversation about fairness or respect or boundaries. I wasn't going to try to convince Sarah that her husband's feelings mattered as much as her brother's convenience. I was done. The decision settled into my chest like something that had always been there, waiting for me to notice it. I wasn't angry at Sarah anymore. I wasn't frustrated with Kevin. I was just finished with a situation that had no solution as long as I was the only one trying to solve it. I finished my coffee and went back to the sofa. But I didn't try to sleep. Instead, I started making a mental list of everything I needed to do. First, I'd call my boss and take a personal day. Then, I'd start looking for an apartment. Something small, something mine. Somewhere I could drink coffee at my own kitchen table without feeling like an intruder. The sun was coming up when I finally closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe properly. Sarah found me drinking coffee in the kitchen the next morning. She was already dressed for work, moving around like nothing had happened, like she hadn't banished her husband to the sofa the night before. "You left the coffee maker on all night," she said, not looking at me. "I made fresh coffee at 3:30. She paused, finally meeting my eyes. "David, about last night. I've been thinking about what you said, about how I treat Kevin." Her expression softened. She probably thought I was going to apologize. Good, because he's family and family doesn't. "I'm taking a personal day today. We need to have a real conversation about this situation." The softness disappeared. "What kind of conversation?" "The kind where we figure out if this marriage is still working for both of us." Sarah set down her coffee mug hard enough to splash liquid onto the counter. "Are you seriously threatening divorce because I defended my brother?" "I'm not threatening anything. I'm trying to understand why asking a grown man to contribute to his own living expenses makes me the villain in this house. Because you knew he was going through a rough time when he moved in. You agreed to help him for a few weeks. It's been over a year, Sarah. He's not even looking for work anymore." She turned away from me, grabbing paper towels to clean up the spilled coffee. "He's been applying to places. The job market is terrible right now. When was the last time he went on an interview?" Silence. "When was the last time he even filled out an application?" More silence. "Sarah, he ordered $200 worth of food on my credit card last month. When I asked him about it, he said it was a mistake. When I asked you, you said I was overreacting. It was a mistake. He's been using my car without permission for months. Yesterday, I found out he borrowed $500 from your cousin Mark and never paid it back. How is any of this my fault for bringing it up?" Sarah finished cleaning the counter and turned back to me. Her face had that sad expression I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant she'd already made up her mind and wasn't interested in hearing alternatives. "Kevin is going through the worst time of his life. His girlfriend left him. He lost his apartment. He's struggling with depression. And instead of supporting him like family should, you're nitpicking him over groceries and utilities." "I'm not nitpicking anyone. I'm asking for basic respect and responsibility from someone who's barely holding it together." "Sarah, he's not barely holding it together. He's playing video games 12 hours a day and ordering takeout on my credit card. That's not depression. That's taking advantage." Her voice went cold. "So, what are you saying? That we should kick him out, put him on the street?" "I'm saying we should treat him like an adult who's capable of taking care of himself, with a timeline and expectations." "You want me to choose between you and my brother?" The words hung in the air between us. She'd said it like an accusation, but she was right. That's exactly what I wanted because that's exactly what the situation had become. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I guess I do." Sarah stared at me for a long moment. Then she picked up her purse and headed for the door. "I'm going to work. When I get home tonight, I expect you to have figured out how to be more supportive of my family." The door closed behind her with a sharp click. I sat there in the empty kitchen, listening to the sound of her car pulling out of the driveway. Then I heard Kevin's alarm clock going off upstairs, followed by the sound of him hitting snooze for the third time. I spent the morning going through our financial records, bank statements, credit card bills, utility payments. I'd been tracking the numbers in my head for months, but seeing them laid out on paper made the situation crystal clear. Our monthly expenses had increased by 65% since Kevin moved in. Not just from an extra person in the house, but from someone who consumed resources like he was trying to set a record. The electric bill alone had doubled. Our grocery costs had gone from $200 a month to over $400. But the real discovery came when I started digging deeper into our joint account activity. 3 months ago, Sarah had withdrawn $800 in cash. When I'd asked about it at the time, she'd said it was for a coworker's baby shower gift and some other expenses she couldn't remember. I'd accepted the explanation because $800 wasn't going to break us. And I trusted my wife. 2 months ago, another $600. This time, she'd said it was for car repairs that the shop had wanted in cash for some reason. Last month, $500. She'd mentioned something about helping a friend, but she'd been vague about the details. I pulled up our online banking and went back further. The pattern was there, going back almost to when Kevin first moved in. Small withdrawals here and there, always with reasonable explanations, always in amounts that wouldn't trigger a big conversation. Kevin wasn't just not contributing to the household. Sarah had been giving him money, our money she'd been taking from our joint account and handing over to her brother without telling me. I sat back in my desk chair and stared at the computer screen. The betrayal wasn't just about choosing Kevin over me. It was about lying to me while she did it. I thought about all the conversations we'd had about money being tight. How I'd been picking up extra shifts when I could find them. How I'd been putting off replacing my work boots because we needed to watch our spending. How I'd been feeling guilty about every small purchase while Sarah was secretly funding her brother's lifestyle. The phone rang. Sarah's name on the caller ID. "I've been thinking about this morning," she said when I answered. "I think we both said things we didn't mean." "Did we?" "David, I know this situation isn't ideal, but Kevin really is struggling and he's family. I need you to understand that. How much money have you given him?" Silence. "Sarah, how much money have you given Kevin from our joint account?" "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm looking at our bank statements right now. Cash withdrawals going back over a year. Always with explanations that didn't quite add up." More silence. "Jesus Christ, Sarah. How much? It's not what you think. How much?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Maybe $3,000. Over the whole time he's been here. $3,000 on top of all the food, utilities, and everything else I'd been paying for. $3,000 she'd given to her brother while telling me we needed to tighten our belts. David, he needed help. Real help, not just a place to stay. So, you decided to help him with our money without telling me. I knew you'd say no. You're damn right I would have said no because we're married, Sarah. We're supposed to make financial decisions together. I was trying to help my family. I thought I was your family, too." The line went quiet except for the sound of her breathing. "I'll be home around 6 o'clock, she said finally. "We need to talk about this properly." She hung up before I could respond. I didn't wait until 6 o'clock. After Sarah hung up, I called 3 apartment complexes on the north side of Columbus. The first one had a 1-bedroom available immediately. The second had a waiting list. The third could show me something that afternoon. I drove to Meadowbrook Gardens at 2 p.m. and walked through a small 1-bedroom apartment with hardwood floors and a kitchen that looked out onto a courtyard. It was quiet. It was clean. It was mine if I wanted it. "I'll take it," I told the property manager. "Don't you want to think about it? Talk it over with your wife?" "No." I signed the lease and paid the deposit with money from my personal checking account. The account Sarah didn't have access to. The one I'd been putting a small amount into each month since we'd gotten married. Thinking of it as emergency money. This qualified as an emergency. By 4 p.m., I was back home loading my truck. Not everything, just the essentials. Clothes, my tools, my laptop, a few pieces of furniture that had been mine before the marriage. I worked methodically like I was completing a project at work. Kevin wandered downstairs around 4:30, probably looking for something to eat. "Moving furniture around?" he asked, watching me carry a dresser past the living room. "Something like that." Need help? The offer was so absurd, I almost laughed. Kevin volunteering to help with physical labor. No thanks. He shrugged and went into the kitchen. I heard the refrigerator open and close, then the sound of the microwave starting up. I made 3 trips to the apartment, bringing over the basics. On the 3rd trip, I stopped at an office supply store and bought a small package of note cards. I wrote a simple message on one of them. Sarah, I'm done being treated like an intruder in my own home. I'm done having my concerns dismissed and my boundaries ignored. I'm done being lied to about money. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Don't contact me until you're ready to have an honest conversation about what happened here. David. I left the note on the kitchen counter, propped against the coffee maker, right where she'd see it when she got home. Then I walked through the house one more time. Not out of sentiment, but to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. The place already felt different, like a hotel I'd checked out of, but hadn't quite left yet. I was loading the last box into my truck when my neighbor Patricia came over. She was an older woman, maybe 72, who'd lived next door since before Sarah and I had bought the house. Everything okay, David? Just making some changes. She looked at the truck, then back at me. Patricia wasn't stupid. She'd probably heard some of the arguments over the past few months. You know where to find me if you need anything, she said. Thanks, Patricia. Take care of yourself. I drove to the apartment and unloaded everything in one trip. It didn't take long. Amazing how little you actually need when you strip away all the complications. By 6:30 p.m., I was sitting in my new kitchen with a beer and a sandwich, looking out at the courtyard. No television upstairs. No dishes in the sink that weren't mine. No one borrowing my things or spending my money or making me feel guilty for wanting basic respect. My phone had been buzzing for the past hour. Text messages from Sarah. I turned it off without reading them. For the first time in over a year, I was home. 3 days later, Sarah showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to find her standing in the hallway with red eyes and a desperate expression. She'd been crying, probably for hours. David, please. We need to talk. We can talk right here. Can I come in? No. She took a shaky breath. Kevin is gone. Good for Kevin. You don't understand. He left yesterday, packed his stuff, and disappeared. No note, no explanation. Just gone. I leaned against the door frame and waited for her to continue. I can't afford the house payments without your income. I called the mortgage company and they said I have 30 days to bring the payment current or they'll start foreclosure proceedings. That's unfortunate. I know I messed up. I know I should have told you about the money, but we can fix this. We can work through it. How much money did you give him, Sarah? The real number. Her voice cracked. About $5,000 total. $5,000, not $3,000 like she'd admitted on the phone. $5,000 of our money, handed over to her brother while she told me we needed to cut back on expenses. He took it all when he left, she continued. Everything I'd given him, plus he emptied my jewelry box, my grandmother's ring, the necklace you gave me for our anniversary. Everything. The irony was perfect. Kevin had finally shown Sarah exactly who he was, but only after she destroyed her marriage to protect him. I'm sorry that happened to you. Please, I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll make it up to you. Just come home. I am home. You know what I mean. I looked at this woman I'd been married to for 6 years. She was asking me to fix a problem she'd created by lying to me and choosing her brother over our marriage. She wanted me to come back and rescue her from the consequences of her own decisions. No. What do you mean no? I mean, no, Sarah. I'm not coming back. I'm not fixing this. You made your choice when you threw my clothes on the sofa for asking your brother to be a responsible adult. You made your choice when you started lying to me about money. And Kevin made his choice when he stole from you and disappeared. But I love you. If you loved me, you wouldn't have treated me like the problem for over a year. She started crying harder. Please don't do this. Please don't leave me. I already left 3 days ago. 6 months later, I ran into Sarah's cousin, Mark, at a hardware store in Reynoldsburg. Hey, David, how have you been? Good, Mark. Can't complain. He paused, clearly debating whether to bring up the obvious topic. I heard about you and Sarah. Yeah, for what it's worth, I never understood why she put up with Kevin's garbage for so long. Guy was a professional mooch. You hear from him lately? Mark shook his head. Not since he disappeared. Sarah asked around trying to find him. Turns out he'd been borrowing money from half the family and never paying anyone back. My wife told me he owed her sister $800 from 2 years ago. The picture kept getting clearer. Even months later, Kevin hadn't just been taking advantage of Sarah and me. He'd been working his way through the entire family, one generous relative at a time. How's Sarah doing? Lost the house last month. She's renting a room from her friend Julie now. Works 2 jobs just to pay for that. Mark looked uncomfortable. She asks about you sometimes, whether anyone's heard from you. I'm doing fine. Got my own place. Picked up some freelance work on weekends. Life's good. And it was good. Better than it had been in years. I'd learned to cook for myself again. Made friends with my neighbors. Started taking evening walks without wondering what crisis would be waiting for me when I got home. Sarah had lost her house, her brother, and her marriage because she'd chosen to enable someone who didn't deserve it. Kevin had burned through his welcome with everyone who'd tried to help him, leaving a trail of debt and broken trust. Me? I'd learned that sometimes walking away is the only way to save yourself. Some lessons cost more than others, but they're always worth it in the end.